You ready to go?
I am.
Let's
losing
go.
my voice.
Matt Lenihan for Boxing Social in association with Empire Fight Store and R Kings. It's a pleasure to catch up in person. We do a lot of Zooms, Dan Rafael, but it's a big fight week. I never thought I'd be covering a Manny Pacquiao fight week. The last time I was in this hotel when he was fighting was when I came as a fan, and I still didn't get tickets for the fight, for the Floyd Mayweather fight. Me and my girlfriend came over. We were in this hotel because I booked it prematurely thinking something will happen. It happened. I think we ended up watching it at Mandalay Bay or something like that on one of the big screens. So to say I'm covering his fight, I'm a little bit staggered, but also I still don't know what to make of it because we don't know what we're going to see. What's it like for you? You've seen Manny back today. He's in good spirits. Seen him training. What's your thoughts on fight week?
Well, first of all, I was not surprised that he ended up coming back from retirement. He's been talking about it for a long time. I've made the point to a few people that when he retired post-Ugas, that was more motivated by his political aspirations as opposed to not being able to box anymore, even though he lost that fight. I don't think he felt like I can be a serious candidate for the president of the Philippines and still be an active boxer. So that was that. And when he didn't win the election, people kind of forget that wasn't that long ago, like a year or so ago, where he and his team were over in Saudi Arabia meeting with Turki Al-Sheikh to try to sell him on a fight with Manny against Conor Benn. This is obviously before the fight took place with Eubank, and Conor at that time was still dealing with his suspension in the UK. So the fact that he's back is not in any way a surprise. You talk about, though, the reality of actually being here, like it's kind of like weird to me because I've covered zillions of fights of Manny's, and have him back and like no time has passed. He's still talking the same and still looks the same, and we'll find out if he can still fight the same. But I'm sort of like think back when they were talking at the press conference and Ray Flores asked, who was the MC, asked Manny about the night all those years ago, 24 years ago, when he was here in this building and he destroyed Lalo Ledwaba as an unknown fighter, basically, to become the title holder at 122 pounds. I don't want to date myself, but I was here for that fight. This will be Manny Pacquiao's 16th fight in this building. It'll be my 15th Manny Pacquiao fight in this building. I only missed the Morales first fight because I was deathly ill that week. So I've had a long run with Manny, and he's never been, we'll put it like this. It's been my great privilege to chronicle his career, at least from the beginning of fighting in the United States. It's my 25th Manny Pacquiao fight I'm at, much less the ones I've written that I didn't attend. So to see him back in the ring, you're like, what are we doing here?
You say, what are we doing here? So the general consensus I get when I speak to people, they're either like, look, Manny Pacquiao, the reason he's coming back and the reason it's Barrios is because he's one of the weaker champions. And that's not me saying that's what people say to me. But then on the flip side to that, Mario Barrios is an active fighter, two-weight world champion, however you want to dress it up. And the reality of life is time doesn't stop for anyone. Now, he was in an exhibition a few years ago. Didn't look great. I heard he didn't train for it, but still. Are there any concerns for you with him coming into this fight having a 4-year absence?
100%. And like you said, he didn't just look bad in the exhibition. He looked absolutely terrible in the exhibition. And Barrios is the weakest of the guys with the belts at the time that the fight was made. And that's not a knock on Barrios. But if you ask anybody, I don't think they were going to rate him ahead of Brian Norman. I don't think they were going to rate him ahead of Boots Ennis, who was subsequently in the process of vacating the second title. He already vacated the IBF title because he's going up in weight. So, but more notably than whoever you think are the best champions is that with Barrios, it was a very makeable fight because of the fact they both work with Al Heyman and PBC, and it was on the table for them to make the match. So that doesn't surprise me. And so what happens in the fight, I mean, I don't know, man. I don't think anybody knows. That's one of the reasons we're here to see what happens. But the thing, and you said about how time waits for nobody. It's obviously true. I've seen fights where guys come back throughout history, and they may look good in camp, and they sound good when you talk to them, and you can watch them do some drills, and like, hey, they got some snap on their punches, and everything's good. Like, but I've equated it to a car. You buy the car, you put all the nice detail on it, you give it a nice wax job, right? You do the rims all beautiful, you tint the windows, it looks fucking amazing. And then you go to take it out for a drive, and you realize there's really nothing under the hood. And so I question that maybe Manny looks good and everything he's doing in the build-up is the right thing, and he sounds good and talking good and maybe look good at times in the training camp that were open to the public. But when the bell rings for the real fight, does he have anything left under the hood? And I don't know the answer to that.
Well, we'll find out Saturday. One of the sub-stories that's come from Lance Pugmire, I believe, is that rumblings of a talk. I mean, this is wild for me. Like, if Manny Pacquiao was to come through against Barrios, obviously collect the world title, WBC world title, there's potential, and that apparently there's been talks, allegedly. Look, I'm only reading what I've read online from Lance, who I respect a lot, that we could see Mayweather Pacquiao too. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, at least when Lance wrote the piece, and Lance is one of my good friends in this business, he quoted people that said that was happening, but it was only from the Pacquiao side. I personally don't believe that's real. I don't think Mayweather is coming back, and I don't think that if they did do a rematch that it would engender the kind of attention that people would really think about making a big mega fight, because the first fight sucked so bad. Yeah, it generated the biggest amount of money ever in the history of combat sports, $650-something million, and the fight stunk. And now the guys are, it's literally, that fight was in 2015. It's 10 years ago. I would rather self-immolate than see that rematch. That means set myself on fire than see that rematch, okay? When I tell you my worst experience, you can laugh all you want.
That's wild.
Okay, I'm deadly serious when I say this. I have been doing this for 25 years. The single worst experience of my entire career of covering boxing was covering that fight week. Forget about the negotiations and all the bullshit that led up to the fight. That was a fucking drama and a chaos and an irritation to death. But the fight week sucked so bad. It was so terrible. Everybody acted like such an asshole that week. I don't ever want to see them in the ring together. I don't even want to see them in the same fucking room together. We clear?
Yeah, that's clear enough. I don't think I've ever said rather set myself on fire, but look, interesting sidebar. Look, for me, I've got to say the undercard to this fight is brilliant. I think Pitbull and Fierro was one of the best fights I've seen live in a long time. I think was that the Benavidez card it was on. Terrific fight, always exciting. And Fundora, Tim Tszyu, there's a lot of questions to be answered there as well. So it's a good, strong card.
Yeah, if you're somewhat skeptical about what happens in the main event because of Manny's layoff and the age and all that, they have definitely put on quality in terms of the other bouts on the show. I was here for that fight in February when Fierro and Pitbull had their first fight on the undercard of Benavidez against Morrell. Phenomenal bout. I mean, and it was so great because if you remember when they did the match, the WBC was put like an honorary, it wasn't a world title fight, but they had the Aztec Warrior belt. They were paying tribute to the late, great Israel Vasquez, who had died in the weeks before the fight. They had his family at ringside. They honored him. And, was there any more of the epitome of a Mexican warrior than Israel Vasquez? So to have that at stake and to do that presentation in front of the family with so many Mexican and Mexican-American fans in the crowd, and then for those two guys to go out and do what they did, just made it that much better. And so I suspect they'll put on another great fight on Saturday. And Fundora Tszyu was a great matchup. We saw what happened in the first fight. Their fight was a classic for, unfortunately, because of the crazy injury that Tszyu had with the cut. Yeah. But it was memorable. It was dramatic. And they're doing it again. Tim trying to get his title back. And they have the opening fights, maybe not at that level, but Brandon Figueroa against Joet Gonzalez, which is a featherweight eliminator in the WBA. That's a pretty solid matchup also. Can't complain about that either.
Definitely a stacked card, a good quality card. Let me just talk about the cards that have just gone by, obviously. I want to start with the ring one. Start with Shakur Stevenson. For me, a fantastic performance. I'd seen a lot of Zepeda in the build-up. I'd seen him against, he fought my good friend Maxie Hughes. The volume of punching was phenomenal in that fight. Look, I know Farmer caused him some problems, but he's still a dangerous fighter. And, Shakur went out there, and I know he got caught on the ropes, but for me, from what I was seeing, I thought it was a tremendous performance. He showed us a lot in that fight.
No question, Shakur showed a complete game that night. He came to prove a point. Shakur's not a dummy. He knows he's been tortured by fans and press for his, let's call them less than entertaining performances in some of his fights, particularly the De Los Santos fight and the Hartunian fight, and not only by fans and on social media. And in some critical columns and things by writers and people on YouTube commentating and this and that. But you had Turki Al-Sheikh himself, who was paying for the event, making the reference to the Tom and Jerry fights. Clearly, one of the people he was speaking about was Shakur Stevenson. I thought Shakur took it pretty well because if you remember during the build-up, or maybe it was in the post-fight, whatever it was, he had a baseball hat on that said Tom and Jerry, had a little picture of the cartoon characters on it. So he took it in a good spirit. And he was basically like, I feel like he did the right thing. He didn't cry about it. He didn't mope. He didn't, get angry and not talk to anybody. He was like, I'll show you guys. And he went out there and he walked the walk and then he talked the talk and he did the fight and he won and he put up I feel like that might be the best performance of his career because, of the pressure because of all the things we just said, but also because he was in with a very competent and quality opponent. And on top of that, the pressure having had to change his style, which is not something that guys like to do, and to do it in front of Turkey, that obviously his future earnings are going to probably be largely dependent upon how he performs in that particular fight. So while I totally disagreed with the crazy scores that had it like 11 rounds to 1 on one card and I think 10 rounds to 2 on the other cards, I thought that was a super close fight because I thought Zepeda pretty much did what he wanted in the first like 4 or 5 rounds of the fight. And so when it was all said and done, yeah, Shakur closed it out. He won the last couple of rounds very decisively. So for me, I had it a 7-5 fight, but with Shakur clearly the winner. So I didn't think that was any kind of 11-1 kind of fight. But regardless of how you scored it, Shakur won the fight, did so clearly, and looked good doing it, and showed that he can make an entertaining fight against a quality opponent. And if he's going to fight like that or even approach that, he's going to become a much more fan-friendly kind of fighter.
It's always difficult when people throw comparisons out. I feel it's almost a little bit unfair, but when I'm watching that fight and I see him do the certain movements on the ropes, but then when I see him stand in the pocket and he was varying his jab up to the body, that stabbing jab, it is very reminiscent of a Floyd Mayweather and how he kind of fights. And when you're seeing that in front of your eyes unfold, it was like, wow, he's dipping into his bag of tools here, which he normally doesn't have to do. I think that's what made the performance stand out for me.
Well, he said after the fight in the interview in the ring, that he had to kind of go into the tool chest and pull a few things out that he hadn't been using. And yeah, what he did was he didn't run. I've said this to many people over the years. My favorite kind of fighter to watch are the guys that have the superior skills and can really know how to box and have the technique, but they can stand and fight also. So that's what made me a big fan of people like Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar was a brilliant amateur, gold medal winner, won everything, true boxer, but liked to brawl and mix it up if he had to, no problem. Same thing, other guys I mentioned in that same kind of vein is Shane Mosley was like that, Meldrick Taylor was like that. But again, they didn't put themselves in any kind of crazy, where they weren't responsible on defense. They still tried to adhere to that, and I thought Shakur did a great impression of that because he stayed in the pocket. He used his shoulder roll. He used his head movement. He moved his upper body, and even when he got hit, he was able to deflect maybe the brunt of the punch and didn't take a tremendous amount of damage. And so that makes it a lot more entertaining to watch. And it's hard to do that too, to have that technique. I think, frankly, it's maybe easier to just run away than to stand there and move and make the guy. The old saying, make him miss and make him pay, and that's what Shakur did. The good thing was his hands held up. We know he's had brittle hands, so that didn't come into effect. I don't want to make excuses for him, but it is a true fact that he was injured in the fight against De Los Santos. So, look, he deserves all the compliments and all the positive reviews that he's getting because he lived up to what he said he would do, and he went out there and he basically won against a really quality opponent.
Have you seen the back and forth between himself and a Conor Benn? Do you know what? Me and Con were walking through, must have been the area at all hours. Anyway, beside the point. But as we're walking back, we were saying, I wonder when the Benn and Eubank rematch will get done and what's going to happen. As soon as we said that, less than 10 seconds later, Chris Eubank walks just behind us in the area, and I was like, one of them surreal moments where you go, holy shit. I said, is that like Chris? He's like, turns around. So we asked him a few questions about it, and what he said was, I'm not sure about the date. He said, but we want the fight to happen, etc. But if it didn't happen, Shakur Stevenson and Conor Benn at 147. I know we're maybe jumping the gun here, and look, Conor has to come down, but that's an interesting fight if Shakur fancies moving up a couple of weights.
Yes and no. Shakur got a lot of business he can attend to at lightweight. Shakur got a ton of business he can attend to at 140. Let Conor Benn do the rematch that is obligated. Maybe let Conor Benn go win, the British title, the European title, maybe a world title. He hasn't done any of that. And don't get me wrong, I'm a fan. He did lose against Eubank. So while that fight certainly could be built in the future, it doesn't make, literally to me anyway, makes no sense right now when there's so much other business for both guys to do for a lot of money. Because if you make Shakur against Benn, is that bigger than Eubank rematch? Is that bigger than, and against Shakur, let's say, against anybody of the champions at 140? You think that's bigger than Shakur against Teofimo Lopez? Or I don't think so. So, it's cool that they're going to talk shit like that. I'm not going to knock that. So down the road, if it does become a thing, maybe so. But I mean, Shakur's not ready to be a 47-pounder, and Conor's got his stuff to handle.
Hamzah Sheeraz. I spoke to him in the week, and I've spoken to him on numerous fight weeks. He's very much what I would call suit and tie professional. He won't get involved. He might have a little word back, but he's completely polar opposite, as many are, I suppose, to Edgar Berlanga, who's loud, he's brash, he talks the shit, and then he goes out and fights. Now, what did you make of his performance? That was as brutal as a finish as you will get. Fair credit to Berlanga. He didn't jack in, he didn't quit. He tried to get up every single time, but ultimately Hamzah was too good on the night.
I thought it was a great performance from Sheeraz. Took a couple of rounds to sort of see what you got in front of you, figure out, all the things you want to figure out, whether it's your distance or, whatever kind of power he may have, that type of thing. And eventually he just kind of unloaded on him. And Berlanga got caught with a tremendous punch. Sheeraz looked a lot better at 168. I know he got a lot of criticism for the performance at middleweight when he fought for the title against Adames, but it was very clear, I think, to anybody that's observed boxing for a while that it was legit that he was having struggles making 160 pounds. Clearly not the case at 168, at least compared to 160. And if you didn't know that he was a guy fighting at middleweight and you didn't know any of his background and you just looked at him and Berlanga, you'd be like, Sheeraz is a way bigger guy anyway, longer reach, obviously bigger height. As my friends in Britain say, he did the job. I mean, he looked... The two knockdowns in the fourth round were devastating. I do give Berlanga a lot of credit for actually making it out of the round and surviving, because a lot of guys might not have survived either one of those knockdowns. He was able to show the balls to get up. But once the next round started, round 5, he still hadn't recovered, and it didn't take much. I mean, I don't think those last couple of shots were devastating blows, but he was so messed up from what had happened in the fourth round that he got rocked and put his glove down on the canvas, and at that point the referee did the right thing and stopped the fight. So for Sheeraz, as you mentioned, all business, doesn't shit talk, doesn't have a lot to say, but the old saying, the old cliches, he lets his hands do the talking.
I was going to say, I spoke to Andy Lee in midweek, and he said, look, one of the things about him is he's a murderous puncher. I says, because he's always said he's got Paddy Donovan, he's talked to me for years about how hard it is to get him sparring, because some of the spars he has where he's dominating, he says, but Sheeraz, when he holds the pads up, he punches. But the talk is now that he will then potentially roll into a Canelo fight, providing whatever happens with Canelo and Crawford. We don't know what happens there yet. We've still got that to see. But interested in that Sheeraz-Canelo? Do you think it could happen? Would Canelo want that fight?
I think it can happen because Sheeraz is aligned with Turkey. After the Crawford fight, Canelo supposedly still has 2 more fights left with Turkey. Turkey said in the lead-up that the reason that Berlanga came to fight Berlanga, or the reason that Sheeraz came to New York to fight Berlanga in Berlanga's hometown, was because of the promise from Turkey that he would give him one of the 2026 spots against Canelo. So I guess, Canelo has not been in the, I know people will say he avoided David Benavidez, and that's fair to say, but if you look over the course of a 20-year or so career, he hasn't avoided guys. Could it happen? Yeah, absolutely. And I think also the other fight that has been mentioned for him, which is a doable match. We'll see what happens with the rematch if it happens with Benn, but he's also mentioned Chris Eubank Jr. as an opportunity, as an option, I should say, for Canelo in 2026. So, look, Sheeraz did what he had to do. Now, I don't think, I saw Turkey post, now that he's beaten Berlanga, he deserves the shot at the title. Again, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. It was Berlanga. I made the point, somebody was comparing the massive knockout. That was like Tommy Hearns, type of knockout because he's long and lanky at that weight. I'm like, let's all slow down. He knocked out Edgar Berlanga. He didn't knock out Roberto Duran. He didn't knock out Pupino Cuevas. So I like to sort of keep an even kill. Sheeraz obviously is better than what we may have seen in Adames. I'm not sure he's going to be the same way against all the other super middleweights the way he did against Berlanga. Probably somewhere in the middle.
Last one from me. Obviously, news came out about Gervonta Davis. I don't want to really go into the personal side of it. More of a disappointment that probably not going to see this rematch anytime soon with Lamont Roach after everything that went on in the first fight. How sort of a bit of a letdown is that we're maybe not going to see that at least as soon as we thought?
Disappointing, but par for the course with Tank. The best laid plans often get messed up. Remember before he got the draw, he was going to be fighting Jake Paul in an exhibition fight. And when that draw happened, they ended those discussions. That fight was basically made. And now Roach, I feel bad for Roach because he's sitting there waiting, and his team is not getting a lot of answers from the Tank people from PBC. And so he's sort of just twiddling his thumbs, trying to figure out what's going to happen. I saw some reporting where, since even before Gervonta got arrested, last week, in my experience and knowing the way that these fights go about in terms of what you have to do logistically to pull them off, even before his arrest, I felt like there was no chance it was happening August 16th. There was too many things to do still. They hadn't even had a press conference. The guys weren't in their camp training. They hadn't even had, and this may be a small thing to guys like you and me, but for them, logistically, it's important. They put the people in the camp to film the video footage so they can make those shoulder program shows to help promote the event. So the point is, they hadn't put tickets on sale. You can go on down the laundry list, all the things that hadn't gotten done, and time was running awfully short as we're approaching, 5 weeks before the fight. So there was no chance it was happening the 16th. So now that he has been arrested and, I'm not sure what's going to happen in terms of adjudicating his case. So I've saw some things about, well, maybe they'll try to push it back a couple of weeks into the later part of August or September. But I've got a hard time seeing that either, because I don't think an extra 2 weeks in August is going to matter. And then once you hit that, the first week of September here in America is a holiday, is Labor Day, which nobody's watching pay-per-view on Labor Day. They're barbecuing and kids are going back to school, and they're closing up the swimming pools and all that business. So I don't think that's a great time to have a big pay-per-view boxing match. And then, could they do it later in September, I suppose, but then you run into traumatic conflicts with big-time college football games, and it's just not conducive to the big event. So we'll see. I mean, I just am disappointed because Tank has, once again, put himself in a position to be in trouble with the law.
Dan Rafael, always a pleasure catching up. A lot to digest. Let me get my words out. And we look forward to seeing Manny Pacquiao return this Saturday. Appreciate it. And also make sure you subscribe to Dan's newsletter. The link will be in the bio as usual, and it'll be across our social media on Boxing Social. Appreciate it, Dan.
Thank you.